Hello, I'm Kevin Fleece and I'm here at the GBTA broadcast studio. Joining me today is Petrina Goh, Head of Commercial, Southeast Asia and Hong Kong for CWT Meetings and Events.
Hi,
Thanks
Kevin.
for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump into our first question. Meetings and events are an integral part of our industry. How would you say meeting and event planners are navigating the current environment, especially with the reality of elevated prices and inflation?
Yeah, I think it has been quite a challenge for a number of meeting planners across the entire MICE ecosystem, right? In 2022, we saw an almost 58% increase in prices across challenges from the lack of resources, from the fuel price challenges, and so on. So I think in a manner of which the way our planners should be navigating this sort of price hike is to understand a fundamental difference that not everything has to do with cost, and cost does not equal to value. But what could really help them with navigating this price hike challenge across such a challenging economic climate really is planning early, I think. Looking at planning in a 12 months timeline would really affect the prices that you would get as opposed to planning in a 3-month timeline.
Right.
Because, looking at the availability of the venues, that would not be as much of a challenge, especially in destinations like Japan and Korea, where with the opening of China, the price hike has really seen a phenomenal increase. The other thing to look at possibly is looking at less primary tier cities. I think looking at secondary tier cities like Yogyakarta, for example, looking at places in Vietnam outside of the predominant destinations or cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi.
Yeah.
I think looking at places like Phu Quoc and Nha Trang, which are now up and coming with a lot of international properties, but at maybe 70% of the prices that you would get in primary cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi would be also interesting. And even organizing your events in China, if you look outside of Shanghai and Beijing into places like Hangzhou, for example, or Lijiang, the prices also are vastly different from what you would get in primary cities. That's really what would help planners navigate this sort of challenging climate, because looking at the MICE infrastructure in some of these secondary cities, they are equally as good in some of the first tier cities. That would be the first thing that comes to mind. So yeah.
That's great. Sage advice. I love that. So as you think about how you measure success in the meetings and events space, what key performance indicators do you look at or do you consider to be important to measure results and success?
I think we are always tied to what our clients hold as part of their KPIs as well. And the discussion around costs, savings, and avoidance will always be the number one KPI. But moving forward today into a new generation of workforce and meeting planners, the other things that they look at as part of their KPIs of success are the audience engagement metrics as well. I think they look at how engaged their audiences are in each element of the event, from pre-event campaigning to post-event conversations that take place as well. I think another thing that they also look at is the adoption of technology. And that's really key for us today because you're looking at a very tech-savvy audience as well. Look at the adoption of technology in China, for example. People don't use paper anymore. Everything is on apps. Everything is about AI in driving efficiency and driving down costs in meetings and events as well. So it's all kind of intrinsically tied together. And the last, and I think the most important KPI right now is really on DE&I, diversity, inclusion, and sustainability as well. There are a lot of organizations today that look at having carbon net zero goals. And predominantly, we think meetings and events is a very wasteful industry sometimes because is it tangible, is it intangible in driving ROI or ROO? But having that idea around sustainability, around diversity and inclusion to make sure that you consider every different aspect of cultural in your audience and the comfort level even with technology. So these are really, I think, the 3 KPIs that a lot of our event planners and clients and even across the industry in the partners that we work with look at to consider it a success for any event they organize.
It's a really smart, innovative way to think about it, going beyond just measuring cost and looking at engagement and DE&I. Really good. So, look out into the future, maybe 12 months out. What are the top trends that event planners should look out for over the next year, let's say, or so?
I think the first one would be very similar to what I mentioned earlier, tech and AI. So, for example, this year alone, one of the things that is tied very closely to running an event is getting your audience registered, getting them up to date with what's going to be happening at the event. And so we now look into technology tools that help us to drive that efficiency. CWT recently launched an online tech tool that helps our clients to immediately look at the changes they want to make to a registration website, for example, to say, I need to have the speakers up there up front because they're the most important thing that our audiences will be looking at. And having that instant feedback on the website templates that we built has helped us to save about 20 to 30% of time in churning out this website. And that in turn helps our clients to make sure that they have a longer runway for registration to update and have that pre-event campaigning as well. I think the use of AI also is something that is critical in terms of looking at the trends. Chatbots that don't need to have people answering or being on standby 24 hours a day to answer the standard questions or the usually frequently asked questions that your audience may ask. Also in driving, like using GBTA, I think it's almost a daily usage for a lot of our clients and a lot of our audiences today. That ties into Canva, ties into DALL-E. We always talk about, I think years back we were joking with friends, I wish I could just pull an idea out of my head and visualize it. You can absolutely do that now with some of the AI tools that are on board. And it's something that meeting planners should absolutely be looking at because it saves so much time when now we don't talk about events and conferences the same way as we do 10 years ago. Now we call it experience design. We don't call it meeting planning anymore. So these are really, I think, the trend that we should be looking at. And the last one, of course, would be sustainability. I think we are looking at sustainability away from the front of just going paperless. We are looking at it from a more wholesome approach of leaving a local community better than you found it, for example. So beyond just not printing things for a conference, it goes beyond, can I support local communities or artists or local families, and making sure that when I leave the event destination that I came into, it is a little bit better than I found it. And that's a predominant mindset among the new generation of planners today as well. So these are the two trends I think would be interesting to look out for.
Fantastic. Great insights. Petrina, you really did a fabulous job answering all these questions, and I want to thank you for taking time to meet with us today. So thank you all for joining us in the GBTA broadcast studio. It's been my pleasure having Petrina Goh here from CWT Meetings and Events. Until next time, thank you.